Genius Warlock Chapter 276. Everyone here is a pro, I know that, but I have my own position too, so let me brief you one more time. Arthur, the team leader of the city's security agency, gathered his team. Before starting the operation, he added parts to his golem prosthetic arm, which had grown so large it made his enormous body look small. It looked somewhat slow. However, it promised powerful firepower. The inherent mana is tremendous. Oliver, using his warlock's vision, peered into the mana within the prosthetic and thought. Meanwhile, Arthur continued his explanation. This mission is officially a security agency's mission. We will conduct a surprise raid on Landa's crime organization, find evidence, and clean them up. In other words, this is a legal and clean mission. It was an excuse, but not a false one. The ultimate goal of this raid was to poke at ABC's weakness, eliminate their source of income, and secure their internal information, but officially, it was to clear out a crime organization disguised as a security company. This meant that even the upper echelons of Landa would find it difficult to exert pressure. So forget about ABC or Shamus for now and focus on the task at hand. This is a legitimate act for the sake of Landa's peace. Oliver looked around at the people. Not only Arthur's security agency staff but also the net navigators from the Moirai school calmly accepted his words. They were all experienced veterans. Arthur was satisfied with their reaction and explained about the enemies in the McCluskey Security Company. He had heard it from Carver already, but it didn't hurt to double-check. McCluskey Security Company, although they claim to be a security company, in reality, most of their staff are thugs off the streets. However, they have about 100 people on standby at all times, armed with everything from rifles to heavy weapons. Among them, there are also street wizards and warlocks. There's no need to be scared, but everyone should be careful. He wasn't wrong. Street wizards could generate power equivalent to standard heavy weapons, and if the warlocks were skilled enough to be hired by Shamus, they were likely to have lethal abilities. Working with a large number of gangsters could be quite annoying. Oliver asked, "Where are they?" By they, he meant the druids directly under Shamus. Carver had warned him that these 5 were particularly powerful. Jeffrey, Kittle, Connor, Finley, Carlin, these 5. Jeffrey, Kittle, and Connor are druids with the specialty of natural empathy and had made a name for themselves as solvers in their regions before joining Shamus. Finley and Carlin are criminals with the specialty of anthropomorphism, who thanks to Shamus, have gained new identities and come to Landa. As the name anthropomorphism suggests, they can transform parts of their bodies like beasts. Simple, yet powerful individuals. They are formidable enough to make it difficult to confront them using conventional methods. Oliver recalled Carver's briefing. They were all strong enough to stand on their own anywhere, and right now, they were even more dangerous. Druids were beings who grew stronger in the forest. If you're talking about the druids directly under Shamus, all but Connor have vacated their posts. They've gone to support other paper companies' deals. Oh. Is that so? Yes, it is. Mr. Dave. Albert Hunt, a net navigator from the Moirai school, chimed in. This was the first time he and Oliver had spoken, but unlike typical wizards, he was quite friendly. We found that out from our side. Mr. Wizard's side. You can just call me Albert, and to be precise, it wasn't me, but our Moirai school who found out. We hacked the trade schedule of the paper company via the world tree. You can trust this. He was sincere, and Arthur added, "That's right, the Moirai school gave us support." We compared their information with our security agencies and it matched. 4 out of the 5 druids are not present and won't be able to return for an hour or two. So, it's like we're robbing an empty house. Arthur's words were sincere. It was quite fortunate. Oliver had yet to fight multiple druids in the forest, but instinctively, he knew it would be dangerous. He was curious to know what it would be like, but since it was a mission, he wanted to proceed safely if possible. "Is there anything else you're curious about?" Arthur asked Oliver. Oliver shook his head to signify he had no more questions. Then, Arthur, along with Richard, who was armed with skeletal gloves, sniper Donna, and magic equipment specialist McBoar, among other security agency staff, stood up from their seats or grabbed their weapons. "Okay, let's get started." Fast forward button, 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 fast forward button. In the forest adjacent to Landa's development prohibited area, a building stood tall in the midst of it. Surrounded by iron fences and barricades, the building was solid and sturdy like a small fortress. In fact, it had emplacements with machine guns set up around the building, and armed forces patrolling with guns. It was undeniably excessive armament, even for a security company in Landa. To such an extent that the city recommended to lower the armament level. However, that did not happen. It was a remote forest, and they had used the universal language of Landa, bribery. But on the contrary, it also meant that they were so isolated that they could not get help from outside if they were attacked. Targeting in the dark forest, Oliver quietly chanted, and the emotions held in Oliver's hand moved in wave-like patterns like sentient smoke, each flying towards the distant target. The target was none other than the emplacements with machine guns set up around the building, and there were as many as 25. They didn't just put machine guns in places good for surveillance, they also placed them in spots where they can trap enemies and annihilate them all at once. "The defense is tougher than I thought." Oliver, who had figured out the level of building defense with the eyes of a warlock and mana detection ability, made a judgment. The vice president of McCluskey Security Company was said to be a former military officer, and it seemed that he wasn't just lending his name. Well, that was irrelevant. Oliver threw dozens of black darts filled with bombs of rage into the sky. Sha-ya-ya-ya. A sharp sound of cutting the air resounded, and the black blades hid in the darkened sky. Thanks to this, the majority of the enemies did not notice the existence of the black darts. The black blades flying freely in the sky reached their peak and suddenly changed direction as if being pulled by a magnet, plummeting from above to below, and bombarded with the machine gun defenses of the McCluskey Security Company. Shia-ya-ya-ya, boom. 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 Explosions occurred in the not-so-distant building along with a blast sound. The ground and leaves quivered slightly from the shock of the explosion, and the troops inside the McCluskey Security Company woke up in surprise. "Richard." "Okay." Richard, who had worked with Arthur since his Solver days, shouted, donning the latest model of skeletal gloves. "Fwoosh dash. Fwoosh dash. Fwoosh dash. Weeing dash." As he responded, the engine of the gear rotated and the output of mana increased. With that, Richard turned himself into a shield and rushed towards the McCluskey Security Company. "Follow." Arthur and the entry team formed a large group and closely chased after Richard. By the way, Albert from the Moirai school was in the middle of the formation. The reason why a net navigator, who is not a combatant, was here was to hack the world tree in the security company directly. Some parts of the security of the world tree were too high and could only be penetrated with physical hacking. And I'm here to escort this person. Intruders. An explosion caused a cloud of dust to rise around the McCluskey Security Company, and a gang member yelled out. He was not just any gang member. The considerable amount of mana emanating from his body was the proof. He had experience, as he was able to cast a shield to avoid the blast and was giving commands to the disoriented gang members when he spotted the intruders. Even more astonishing was the fact that, without being flustered, he ordered the gang members and drew upon his mana to shoot a high-density fireball. He's calm, and his mana level is high. He's formidable, even if he's just a wizard who's only in charge of bombardment. In a way, it was efficient. If there was someone to play the role of the shield, it was most effective for the wizard to focus solely on firepower. However, Oliver was not the only one who thought so. Richard, who was acting as the spearhead, saw the wizard's excellent response, became wary, and aimed his shield machine gun at the wizard who was preparing magic, and pulled the trigger. Bang 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 bang. The shield machine gun attached to the thick mechanical arm spat out thick lead bullets, making a dull sound appropriate for its appearance. Its firing rate was somewhat lacking, but its power was real, and the gang members around the wizard had their heads exploded, chests shattered, and were rendered unrecognizable. The wizard, proving he was not ordinary, converted the mana he was preparing into a defensive spell and blocked the lead bullets head-on. Mr. Arthur was right to warn us about this opponent. He's outstanding, of course, so are we. At the moment the wizard relaxed, thinking he had blocked the barrage with his high-density magic shield, a fast-flying object that was hard to follow with eyes quickly caught up to him and shot a laser. Zing! It was none other than one of Arthur's golem prosthetics. The quite skillful wizard was pierced through before he could even fully exhibit his capabilities. The wizard died without even being able to scream. In that brief moment, he radiated emotions such as shock, terror, and frustration. However, it couldn't be helped. This was just the nature of the business. Skill was important, but it wasn't everything. A moment's carelessness, a cunning ambush, or just plain luck could result in death, regardless of skill. Mr. Forrest used to say that even that was a part of skill. Vrum crack crack. In sync with Arthur, Richard, who had defeated the wizard, held up his machine gun shield to block the sparse bullets flying at him, and then swung his massive sword, effortlessly tearing through the iron mesh fence surrounding the building. Lightning chain. As soon as the iron mesh was torn, one of Arthur's wizard agents quickly squeezed through the mesh and shot a blue lightning bolt. The blue lightning stretched out into 5 sharp tendrils, slashing from top to bottom at the gang members hidden behind cover. Zap 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 zap. With a deafening noise echoing around, the lightning not only fried its targets, but also those standing next to them. Arg! Ugh! The gang members couldn't even scream properly as the electricity caused their muscles to stiffen, and one by one, they turned into charred husks. The scattered gang members were taken aback at the sight and hesitated. Arthur's group had seized control of the battle. As if to drive the point home, Arthur aimed his golem prosthetic like a cannon and fired mana. A blue laser drew across, sweeping away the scattered gang members like a broom. Sweep them off. Chapter 277. 2 beams of blue magical lasers swept across the surrounding enemies in diagonal lines. The gangsters scattered at the simple yet overwhelming attack, and as soon as he confirmed this, Arthur yelled out, "Sweep them off." As soon as the order was given, numerous security members who were behind Richard moved. Most of them were mana users. Using their trained bodies and mana, they charged at an amazing speed and plunged into the scattering gangsters, swinging their axes, swords, and shotguns. Moreover, Two mana user agents specialized in lightning attacks launched timely support attacks, frying the enemies and trying to counter-attack amidst the confusion with lightning. Zzzzzzzzzzz. The surroundings, darkened by shadow, sparkled with blue lightning, and then an explosion occurred, and red flames illuminated the surroundings. Even if they were prepared, it would have been hard to deal with such a brutal attack, but the majority of the gangsters who were taken by surprise couldn't even make a proper counter-attack and were one-sidedly beaten. Only the gangsters gathered a little away on the rear and side of the building saw a chance for a counter-attack, and those deployed at the front of the building that was directly attacked could not withstand it and ran away. Well, they couldn't even do that properly due to the wire mesh. Sweep them all. Ha 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 ha. Die, you criminal bastards. The agents chased after the fleeing gangsters and shouted in grotesque excitement. At a glance, they seemed to be excitedly running wild without caring about the consequences, but that was not the case in reality. Rather, they were coldly orchestrating such a scene to attract the enemy's attention and induce false judgments. Proving this, Arthur didn't stop his excited colleagues but took advantage of the moment when the enemy's attention was diverted and ripped open a backpack-sized glutton bag on his waist with both hands. The glutton bag cried as it was torn apart, shedding tears. Ah, eek! As the glutton bag was torn into two and screamed, dozens of small golems in the form of spiders poured out. They were products of McBoar, a magic equipment expert. McBoar, who had been working with Arthur since the Solver days, specialized in rear support by using small golems to understand the surrounding terrain and provide support attacks. As soon as they came out, dozens of small golems spread out swiftly like baby spiders. This will secure the view of the rear. Securing the view of the rear was the first step towards the success of this operation. The reason for that seems like that guy has secured the view. Arthur said, looking at the purple magic circle hanging in the dark night sky. Oliver also saw it. The magic circle shone brightly and poured out a rain of lead. It was a machine gun created by a collaboration between the Spatial Magic faction and Browning Inc. Despite being a single piece, it took advantage of its overwhelming position in the sky and swept over the vast property of the McCluskey Security Company. As a result, the gangsters who were looking for a chance to counter-attack from the rear and side of the building were shot down without even getting a chance to fire, and they died in vain. It felt unfairly overwhelming. Nevertheless, the machine gun didn't stop, and the lucky survivors retreated into the building to save their own lives. Naturally, the second attack followed. Bang. Zzzzzzzzzzz. Bang. Zzzzzzzzzzz. Bang. Zzzzzzzzzzz. A few of the small golems that quickly crawled into the building triggered an electrical explosion near the gangsters. The magic embedded in the golems oxidized, discharging electricity and burning everything within several meters. The inside of the building, where they had fled to avoid the machine gun rain, had ironically turned into a trap filled with bombs. It could be described as a relentless offensive. I won't even need to move, Oliver thought, watching the capability of the security agency. Each individual's skills were about the level of an excellent solver, but they demonstrated tremendous synergy through their powerful equipment and teamwork. Just one offensive had killed over half of the gangsters in the security company. There were a few survivors, but the majority were in a panic, their will to fight crumbling. It seemed the battle could end just like that. As Oliver thought that, mana waves spread out from inside the building with a whoosh. It was not a physical attack, but Oliver immediately understood the effect it would produce. It was a disruptive wave composed of mana. The electrical explosions that had been continuously occurring inside the building stopped, and the small golems froze. The enemy had triggered this to cut off their rear support. Their own communication devices would also be incapacitated. However, considering the pros and cons for both sides, it could be considered a daring decision. After all, staying still would only be detrimental to them. Kwang. As soon as the rear support was cut off, the gangsters who had taken refuge inside to escape the machine gun broke through the walls and jumped out. At the forefront, gangsters who had enhanced their bodies with disease enhancement potions ran excitedly, and behind them, gangsters armed with submachine guns followed in an organized manner. Impressive. Their morale was definitely crushed just a moment ago, but they're immediately regaining courage and pushing back in. There weren't many things to think about in this situation. The most probable was that an ally scarier than the enemy had taken command. Slow reflexes leg harden inducing fear immobilize 4 warlocks who had been hiding behind the gangsters with abnormally swollen muscles due to disease enhancement potions suddenly popped out and each unleashed diseases and manipulation type black magic. The multitude of black magic launched in a surprise attack reached the intended place and covered the leading mana users and agents like paint. As a result, the agents' reflexes slowed, their legs stiffened, and a subtle fear was induced, stiffening their bodies. Each one wasn't that deadly, but when stacked, the effects were tremendous. Thanks to this, the agents couldn't respond properly even to the gangsters who had forcibly doped their bodies with potions and were moving sluggishly. Damn it! As their colleagues faced a crisis, Arthur and Richard each tried to help. That's when Oliver, who was behind them, passed by them and spoke. "I'll handle this." Before Arthur could respond, Oliver stepped forward and manipulated the black suit tied to the end of his quarterstaff to unleash black magic. Voracity, the black suit wrapped around the quarterstaff, responded to the caster's will and transformed into dozens of small mouths, which Oliver swung near his allies. Chup. 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 A creepy, disgusting sound echoed, and Voracity cleanly sucked up the disease and manipulation type black magic covering the bodies of the allies. The startled warlocks desperately tried to activate black magic, but unfortunately, Oliver wasn't here simply to dispel the black magic from his allies. He was here to respond a bit more proactively. Vomit it out. Oliver swung the quarterstaff towards the enemies again. Along with that, Voracity vomited out the black magic it had swallowed just before at the enemies. The sticky black mud-like black magic covered not only the gangsters but also the warlocks, slowing their reflexes, hardening their legs, inducing fear, and stiffening their bodies. The situation was completely reversed with a single black magic spell. It felt strangely refreshing. However, that wasn't the end. "I'll borrow a bit." Oliver reached out to the body of the lightning wizard whose black magic had been dispelled, took a bit of the lightning property mana, mixed it with the mana stored in his body, and transferred it to the quarterstaff, striking the ground. The mana attached to the quarterstaff responded to the impact with the ground, and the caster's will spread forward in a fan shape along the ground, and swept away the enemies slowed by black magic in an instant. Their anticipated counterattack was nullified by Oliver's intervention. That's what they thought. Oh! Oliver let out a sound as he saw the tree roots suddenly sprouting around him. The tree roots imbued with the green druid energy rose from all directions, trying to entangle Oliver. Oliver swung the quarterstaff to fend off the tree roots, then stepped back and followed the origin of the roots with his gaze. "You're not ordinary." What's your identity? A man spoke from the top of the building, which was a mess from the explosions and machine gun attack. It was a dark night, so his face couldn't be clearly seen, but two things were certain. One was that he was tall. The other was that he was a druid. Connor. Oliver guessed based on the druid energy and the information Arthur had given in advance. He used the druid energy to raise tree roots from the ground again and surrounded the building. I ask again. What are your identities? If you reveal your identities, not only will you be spared, but I will also talk to our boss and get you high-paying jobs. Surprisingly, Connor's words were sincere. This was an attitude worth emulating, the proactive approach to recruiting talents. Zing. However, Arthur seemed to disagree as he used his golem prosthetic arm to shoot a laser, thereby responding on their behalf. As the linear blue laser flew towards him, the druid clustered tree roots together to create a shield. Thanks to the druid energy, the tree roots managed to block the highly destructive laser. I'll take care of this, you proceed inside. Arthur shouted. It was a sudden statement, but Oliver quickly grasped the situation. Speed was of the essence in this situation. Although the probability was low, if there was a delay, the druids who had gone out might return, and perhaps the enemies who had detected this side's objectives could move the internal data. In a mission, one must consider various possibilities. Believing so, Oliver approached the building, the entrance of which had grown thin due to the formation of the shield, and went to the net navigator, Albert. May I put my hand on your body for a moment? Yes. As soon as he heard the reply, Oliver lifted Albert onto his shoulder and started running. You guys follow him. Richard and I will handle this side. We will follow you as soon as we've dealt with him, so don't worry and go. Upon Arthur's command, the other agents followed Oliver into the building. Where do you think you're going? The druid extended his hand. From beneath the ground, green druid energy stirred, and tree roots shot up. With a loud noise, the tree roots that rose were like a mix of giant clubs and whips, moving heavily but flexibly, attacking everyone trying to enter the building. Of course, this included Oliver. In response, Oliver wrapped the black armor around the end of his quarterstaff, shaping it into a hammer, and swung it forcefully towards the tree roots. Quang! The tree root, which appeared to be about the size of a tree trunk, surprisingly could not withstand the power of the quarterstaff and tore apart. You seem to be the most dangerous one. Druid Connor, who had been watching the situation, leaped towards Oliver without a moment's hesitation, extending his fist. Get back! Before Connor's fist could reach Oliver, Arthur launched his drone, shooting Connor at close range and pushing him back. Taking advantage of this, Oliver, still carrying Albert, ran back into the building. Vroom! As they reached the entrance of the building, the ground trembled slightly, and Oliver could feel the druid energy concentrating beneath. Adjusting his posture to carry Albert, Oliver exerted force in his legs and stomped on the ground as if causing an explosion. Bang! The ground where Oliver had stomped exploded with dirt flying up, and Oliver disappeared for a moment as he dashed into the McCluskey Security Company with tremendous speed. A little later than him, tree roots and mounds of dirt rose against gravity, covering the front of the building like a landslide. The building was now sealed. Chapter 278 Boom. WHRRRR. Zwoosh. As Dave kicked the ground, a fountain of tree roots and soil shot up, half burying the McCluskey Security Company building. Damn it! Arthur couldn't help but curse as he witnessed the building rapidly getting sealed off. He had heard rumors about the increased power of druids in dense forests, but this display was far beyond his expectations. The idea of someone executing such a large-scale spell while under laser attack was unfathomable. I heard about it, but seeing it firsthand is really different. Did they say they were controlling over 20 druids? Arthur gazed at the spot where Druid Connor stood, utterly astounded by Shamus's formidable abilities. Connor sported armor resembling golden tree bark and leaned against the ground. 1, no, 2 got away. He referred to Dave and Albert. Sensing the abnormal energy, Dave swiftly grabbed Albert, exerted strength in his legs, and in the blink of an eye, they vanished into the building. Well, maybe it's good luck after all. It deviates from the plan, but at least the net navigator made it in. If everyone had tried to enter, it would have taken much longer. Suddenly, a thought brushed Arthur's mind. The act of sealing the building with such immense power seemed more like an attempt to buy time than to repel their enemies. Could it be, are reinforcements on the way? Arthur rose from his position and inquired of Connor, who appeared quite relaxed, radiating an air of superhuman composure. Obviously. Did you think you could attack a business without knowing who owned it? Did you really believe our boss wouldn't be prepared for such a situation? The druid's words dripped with sarcasm, yet there was no hint of falsehood. Quick movements, teleportation, a scroll. Well, you're not as dimwit as you look. Arthur speculated, and the druid promptly affirmed it. Teleportation scrolls were magical artifacts crafted by the spatial school, with even the most basic ones costing several tens of millions. Furthermore, the teleportation range was limited to a few kilometers at most. To achieve greater effectiveness, more expensive scrolls had to be installed, along with auxiliary devices and magic circles. Each installation incurred costs in the hundreds of millions, and as the distance increased, so did the expenses. In essence, it was a costly mode of transportation that boasted only speed. I knew they were making some serious money, but I never realized they were this extravagant. Our boss always said that you have to spend money when necessary, especially when dealing with thieves. So, what's your plan now? My comrades will be here in a matter of minutes. If you flee, they'll chase you. Bam. Midway through the druid's speech, Arthur unleashed a Superman punch, propelled by the force of his golem prosthesis. As a result, the druid had to hastily defend himself, using both hands to block Arthur's fist, interrupting his monologue. The straightforward yet potent punch shattered the tree bark armor that withstood even mana lasers. Tisk, attacking while talking, where are your manners? What manners for a poor Greenland bum who sold his own child? Arthur shouted, gripping Connor's arm tightly before hurling him with all his might. In an instant, the agents who had been observing the situation charged forward simultaneously. Take him down quickly, then follow suit, there shouldn't be any complications, anyway. Fast forward button, 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 fast forward button. I'll walk from here, Albert stated as he had been carried over Oliver's shoulder like a sack of potatoes. Oliver, who had barely made it inside before the building was engulfed in the dirt, instinctively hoisted him onto his shoulder and hurried toward the heart of the building where the world tree resided. Oh, my apologies, Oliver said as he set Albert down. Albert dismissed the apology, saying it was nothing, and proceeded to dart down the corridor littered with bodies. Oliver had been concerned about Albert's speed, but to his relief, it wasn't an issue. I need to reconsider. I assumed he'd be slow because he's a net navigator, but that's not necessarily the case. Oliver reflected on his own preconceived notions as Albert spoke up, You're incredible. You made it in just before the building was sealed off. Thank you. You were a tremendous help. Perplexed, Oliver asked for clarification. Pardon? What do you mean? When we were entering just now. If there had been the slightest mistake, we wouldn't have made it inside the building. Oh. No, don't worry about it. It's all part of the job, after all. Oliver responded honestly, without false modesty. Bringing Albert along was simply a part of his assignment, so there was no need for gratitude. Besides, I might get to witness his hacking skills. Such opportunities are rare. Even during the mission, Oliver's curiosity lingered in his mind. Unaware of Oliver's thoughts, Albert continued to engage in friendly conversation, with a hidden agenda in his tone. From what I've heard, you possess great humility. From what you've heard? Well, I did some research on you, Dave. Don't be too concerned. I wasn't digging up any dirt, just gathering some general rumors. Given my faction's nature, I find solace in acquiring pre-information. Albert belonged to the Moirai school faction, which differed from other factions in its focus on exploring the mysteries of the world tree and placing the utmost value on knowledge and information. Oliver found himself somewhat convinced. I understand. You needn't worry, I'm not offended. You're refreshingly straightforward, just as I've heard. May I ask you something then? While they ran, Albert reached into his pocket, appearing incredibly at ease. Oliver, too, had a faint understanding of the situation. They were close to reaching the central area of the building where the world tree resided. Oliver could sense it through his monosensing ability and his warlock's eyes. But I can't let my guard down until the very end. Anything can happen during a mission. For instance, a druid who I believed had left could suddenly appear. Just as Oliver pondered this, he swiftly grabbed Albert, who was rummaging in his pocket, and forcefully pulled him backward. Caught off guard by the abrupt action, Albert let out a startled sound as a lurking druid lunged from the adjacent corridor, viciously swiping his sharp claws at thin air. Did you notice? Yes. Mr. Finley, Oliver responded, recognizing the face of the unexpected assailant. If his memory served him right, Finley specialized in shape-shifting. True to form, Finley pounced at Oliver like a wild beast, using the wall as a springboard with swift agility. Meanwhile, Oliver's reaction was slightly delayed as he kept an eye on Albert. Minion, Oliver called out, summoning a hidden minion from within him. The minion swiftly emerged and unleashed a hate bullet toward the oncoming attacker. Against an ordinary opponent, the attack would have been too quick to dodge, piercing through their head. However, Finley, living up to his reputation as a druid, deflected the assault with his beast-like reflexes. Pupuck. The force of the attack pushed Finley back, giving the impression that he would launch another assault. But unexpectedly, he retreated. The reason for his retreat became apparent moments later. From a distant corridor, a long and razor-sharp wooden spear hurtled through the air with remarkable speed. Tracking the trajectory of the wooden spear with the naked eye was difficult, and it appeared to be infused with potent green druidic energy, rendering it seemingly impervious to any ordinary shield. It's a good thing I prepared in advance, Oliver thought to himself as he continued running. Using the emotions and life force he had imbued into the corpses strewn about, Oliver activated his black magic. Revive, Obedience, Meat, Shield. Simultaneously, 3 types of black magic got activated. The various corpses scattered along the corridor congealed together, forming a shield that intercepted the incoming attack aimed at Oliver and Albert. Pupuck. As Oliver had anticipated, the wooden spear thrown by the druid proved to be far from ordinary. It pierced through the shield formed by a combination of emotions, life force, and corpses, penetrating halfway. Had Oliver created a sloppy shield, the damage inflicted would have been severe. How did the druid manage to get here? Albert questioned, astonished by the unexpected turn of events. He appeared out of nowhere. It seems he utilized space magic, Oliver replied. Bingo. The druid, Finley, chimed in, his appearance now even more beastly than before, as he swung his arm. With each swing, his strength seemed to amplify in proportion to his transformed state, tearing through the meat shield that had blocked the wooden spear with ease. It was a display of sheer simplicity and power. While Oliver couldn't pinpoint whether it was due to being in the heart of the forest, one thing was certain: it was not a power that could be easily thwarted by a few layers of a black suit. The silver lining here is that I also have an advantage in this environment. Reaching out to the partially torn meat shield, Oliver began his next move. Minced meat. Reciting the incantation, a section of the meat barrier was finally minced and collected in Oliver's hand. The warm blood, stone-like bones, and moist flesh rested within his grasp. Beast skin. Anticipating a counter-attack similar to before, Finley cast a spell upon his own body. Although the surface appeared largely unchanged, Oliver discerned that Finley's skin had become incredibly tough and resilient. It would likely withstand ordinary attacks. However, what Oliver had prepared was far from ordinary. Finger gun. Oliver amalgamated the flesh, bones, blood, and emotions in his hand, shaping them into a bullet-like form. Recalling a potent black magic technique used by Puppet in the past, which demanded a substantial array of ingredients but guaranteed remarkable impact, he aimed and fired. The projectile pierced through the druid's enhanced physical body in a single shot. Puck! 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 As the sound of ruptured flesh resonated, the druid faltered, blood oozing from his wounds. Seizing the moment, Oliver prepared to deliver a final blow. However, in that instant, a colossal beanstalk materialized from behind, snatching Finley away. Oliver's gaze trailed the sudden appearance of the beanstalk, revealing the presence of 3 druids at the far end of the hallway. They were Jeffrey, Kittle, and Carlin, individuals he had heard about during the briefing. Jeffrey yanked Finley using the beanstalk, while Kittle restrained Oliver with a javelin. Their actions displayed camaraderie among them. At least among the same druid. Although Oliver had managed to respond effectively to the initial surprise attack, he remained unsatisfied. While he had inflicted a fatal blow on one druid, 3 others still remained. Moreover, the remaining trio now exhibited heightened vigilance and anger, aware of their comrades' predicament. It seemed their intention was to collaborate and confront Oliver, a situation that posed a considerable threat, particularly when protecting Albert. "Mr. Albert," Oliver called out. "Don't address me by name in front of our enemies," Albert retorted. "Ah, my apologies. May I have a moment, then?" Thank you." Upon receiving Albert's acquiescence, Oliver harnessed a substantial surge of emotions and life force, reaching out toward the path they had traversed. Minced meat doll making. Oliver combined 2 distinct forms of black magic. Minced meat, which disintegrated corpses into minced fragments, and doll making, which instantaneously crafted golems by intertwining these remnants. At this juncture, doll making proved to be the pivotal spell. Depending on the caster's proficiency, it allowed for manipulation of size and shape, enabling creations like massive abominable monsters. "Oh, how grotesque!" Albert, the net navigator, remarked upon witnessing the misshapen meat golem crawling behind him. Oliver reassured him and then directed the golem to engulf and protect Albert entirely. With this, Albert's safety was secured. Oliver propelled the golem, now containing Albert within its confines, charging forward, and he positioned himself atop it. His initial plan entailed escorting Albert to the World Tree before confronting the Druids. "Where do you think you're?" the Druid shouted, obstructing Oliver's path. Regardless of the Druid's physical fortitude, it seemed doubtful whether he could halt a golem composed of numerous corpses. However, the Druids responded by producing a handful of beans, which sprouted into a formidable wall of giant beanstalks. A formidable barrier that wouldn't yield easily. Nevertheless, their action proved self-defeating. As soon as Oliver confirmed the barrier erected between him and the Druids, he focused his gaze, locating Finley, who was being supported beyond the wall. The corpse-inflicted bullets were still embedded in his body. Oliver initiated a new form of black magic. Biobomb, a variant of the corpse bomb technique, Biobomb utilized the embedded corpse fragments within the opponent's body to trigger a forced explosion of life force. Theoretically, the explosion's power would increase in proportion to the opponent's life force. However, being his first attempt, Oliver's explosion wasn't as formidable as he had intended. Nevertheless, it served its purpose. An excessively powerful blast could have resulted in the collapse of the corridor. But it should be enough to break through. They appear to have sustained damage as well. Oliver directed the charging corpse golem towards the cracked beanstalk wall, a result of the explosion, and readied his weapons in both hands. One was a quarterstaff, while the other was a wooden spear previously thrown by the Druid. Thud. The resounding impact reverberated through the building as the corpse golem collided with the beanstalk wall, causing it to crumble into pieces. Subsequently, the three wounded Druids rushed towards Oliver, their bodies bleeding from the explosion. I anticipated their resolve from their emotional state, but I didn't expect them to charge forward with such fierce determination. Oliver scrutinized the advancing Druids. Geoffrey and Kittle approached from both sides, wielding a giant club and a wooden spear, respectively. Carlin charged straight ahead, utilizing his beastly claws and teeth. Responding to their intentions, Oliver swung his quarterstaff encased in black armor and hurled the black javelin-coated wooden spear. The Druids, considerably weakened by the explosion, were inevitably slower than Oliver, who attacked from atop the corpse golem. Consequently, their heads were crushed by the quarterstaff, and their chests pierced by the spear. "You bastard!" Carlin lunged at Oliver like a wild beast. Despite the significant injuries he had sustained, his innate abilities granted him tremendous speed. Minion. Oliver summoned another hidden minion and, with its swift movements, the minion launched bullets of hatred into Carlin's eyes. Swoosh! Swoosh! Kayak! Carlin swiftly raised his arm to block the unexpected assault and even managed to eliminate the minion. Having witnessed Oliver utilize this tactic before, Carlin had come prepared. As a result, all the minions Oliver had stored within him were now depleted. Although Oliver should have been caught off guard, he remained unfazed. After all, he had prepared an additional countermeasure for such a situation. Fourth. Oliver called out, and Child Fourth, stored within a test tube in his pocket, responded, emerging into the scene. Simultaneously, Oliver threw a shrunken corpse doll from his grasp using preset magic. Deactivate shrinking magic. Upon Oliver's command, the magic was reversed, causing the corpse doll rag to return to its original size, obstructing Carlin's path. Taken aback, Carlin attempted to tear apart the corpse doll, but Child Fourth entered the doll and resisted. In mid-air, the druid and the corpse doll Rag 2 engaged in a tangled struggle. Chapter 279 Thump. 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 Kaya-ha-ha. Carlin and the corpse doll Rag 2 collided mid-air, their bodies entwined. Just before the collision, Carlin swung his arm, shattering 5 of Rag 2's arms simultaneously. However, Rag 2's relentless energy ignored the damage and seized Carlin with its remaining 7 arms. Head, face, neck, shoulders, arms, waist, legs, wherever it could grab, it did. With a forceful movement, Rag 2 exposed the awls and razors concealed within its arms, causing agonizing pain. Carlin struggled to escape Rag 2's grasp, enduring the malicious assault throughout his entire body. But the more Carlin resisted, the tighter Rag 2's grip became, stretching him further and worsening his wounds. Head, face, neck, shoulders, arms, waist, legs, everywhere. Drenched in his own blood, Carlin lifted one leg and pushed against Rag 2's chest with all his might. However, it proved to be a fatal mistake. As Carlin assumed an unstable stance, Rag 2 activated a newly installed weapon in its torso, a 4-barreled handgun. Bang! 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 The handgun fired relentlessly, inflicting fatal wounds on Carlin's weakened legs, chest, and abdomen without the need for reloading. Oliver had made a calculated choice, selecting a powerful weapon that could only be used once. And it appeared to be an excellent decision. Carlin's lifeless body crumpled to the ground, confirming the effectiveness of Oliver's strategy. Quite impressive, Oliver thought, gazing down at Carlin's corpse. Despite its distinct appearance, Rag 2, unlike other corpse dolls such as Warlock, Bathory, and Duncan, was ironically made from common materials. It was evident when compared to its counterparts. While Rag 2 might overpower ordinary gangsters, it faced difficulties against superhumans. But now, the truth was clear. By hurling a miniaturized corpse doll at an approaching enemy, undoing the minimization magic, and launching a surprise attack, one could achieve remarkable results. Depending on the quality of the corpse doll, it could even reverse the situation in an instant. Oliver reminisced about the previous battle, pleased with its outcome, while seeking areas for improvement. He assumed his opponents would either be multiple individuals or possess quick reflexes to counter his assault. But it seems I forgot something, Oliver mumbled, scanning his surroundings. As he looked down at his feet, he realized his oversight. There, swallowed by the irregularly shaped corpse golem, lay Albert. Fast forward button, 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 fast forward button. Ugh. 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 Albert had been out of the corpse golem for some time, but he couldn't stop vomiting. Even a brief moment in the pile of corpses had been a harrowing experience. Originally, it was meant to be a safe way to transport Albert to the control room where the world tree was located, but it turned out to be an unintended mistake. Oliver apologized once again. I'm really sorry. It's fine, Albert forced out a lie, though he was far from being okay. When he first emerged from the corpse golem, he couldn't contain his anger and vomited, hurling curses. However, upon seeing the shattered head, the pierced chest, and the torn-apart body of the druid, alongside the unharmed Oliver, he quickly swallowed his anger. He was a man of great patience, indeed. Supported by Oliver, he stumbled forward, making his way to the control room of the World Tree at the center of the McCluskey Security Company. Is the World Tree control room supposed to look like this? Oliver asked, eyeing the large circular space where the world tree was situated. It was completely empty, which seemed odd. It didn't appear to have been empty from the beginning. There were traces of machinery that had been installed on the walls, indicating some abandoned work. But, there are so many traces. So many. The traces filled the huge circular space. Albert sighed and opened his mouth. It's certainly a bit strange. Pardon. Druids don't use machines unlike wizards. Having no real knowledge about druids, Oliver asked why they didn't use machines, and Albert kindly explained. There's a difference in how they interact with the world tree. While wizards use machines for efficiency, paying with mana to temporarily access the world tree, druids don't. They commune directly with the world tree. I hate to admit it, but it's a superior method compared to wizards. Hence, machines are rather cumbersome for them. It's strange from that perspective. Listening to the explanation, Oliver nodded in agreement. It did seem odd that traces of machinery were visible everywhere if the place was operated in the Druids' way. Yet, if they had departed from the traditional approach, it was strange that no machinery remained. It appeared more like they had abruptly halted some experiment. I don't know what's going on, but we should find out through further investigation, Albert remarked. As a member of the Moirai School of Magic, Albert pulled out a thick wooden stake from his pocket. It had lumpy knots protruding from it, seemingly a device for transferring hacked information. I'm going to connect to the world tree now and transfer the internal information to the stake. I'll be vulnerable during this process, so please protect me. Yes, I understand, Oliver replied, spreading his mana around to monitor their surroundings. Meanwhile, Albert infused his own mana into the stake and plunged it directly into the world tree. Pack. The mana-dense tip of the stake pierced through the sturdy-looking world tree in one swift motion, connecting Albert to the world tree through the stake. Oliver focused his energy, his gaze fixed on the scene before him. He had never witnessed someone using the world tree up close like this. Have you established the connection? While observing Albert interacting with the world tree using the stake, Oliver spotted Arthur's group arriving at the entrance to the control room. They appeared considerably disheveled compared to before. Looks like you made it out safely, Arthur commented, bluntly assessing Oliver's condition. It was no surprise since Oliver was not only unharmed but his clothes weren't particularly dirty either. At most, a few wrinkles adorned his attire. Yes. That's fortunate then. Did you by any chance encounter the Druids? I did. Mr. Jeffrey, Ms. Kittle, Mr. Finley, and Mr. Carlin. These four. How did you know? The Druid outside informed us. Where are they? One of them exploded into pieces, and the other three are here. Oliver pointed to the big mouth hanging from his waist. Their bodies were slightly damaged, but he had managed to secure them. Though Oliver responded calmly, Arthur's expression revealed a subtle surprise. How should one put it? Even though he had anticipated it, witnessing it actually happen was still astonishing. Even with their full equipment and skills, it had proven challenging for them to subdue a single druid in the forest. Yet, the young warlock before them had single-handedly subdued four. It was impossible not to be taken aback. Sensing Arthur's emotions, Oliver spoke up to dispel any misconceptions. I was just lucky. If you can face four druids in the forest without a scratch and attribute it to luck, then that luck itself is a skill. Oh, interesting. Mr. Forrest mentioned something similar. But it truly was luck. There were many corpses inside the building, which worked in my favor. If there were no bodies and we had to fight near the tree in a cleared area, it would have been difficult for me to escape unscathed. Oliver's words were not an act of false modesty but an honest expression of his thoughts. Indeed, the fight that took place inside the building had provided a slight disadvantage to the Druids. After all, they couldn't make use of the soil or trees. Of course, even considering these factors, Oliver's accomplishment was undeniably impressive. However, the person involved didn't seem to attach much importance to it. Ironically, this fact only heightened Arthur's admiration. If this mission ended successfully, and if he ended up leading the security agency, he would need to maintain a good relationship with Oliver. Whether it's luck or whatever, thanks. If Albert had been injured, this whole situation could have gone south. It's part of my job. Everyone should learn from this. Humility is a virtue that seems to have become rare these days. It's a shame we don't have any funds to offer as a success fee. Arthur jestingly remarked in his unique jovial tone. However, his words also carried sincerity. He truly regretted not being able to provide Oliver with a success fee. Sensing his emotions, Oliver made a suggestion. Then, can I ask for something else instead of money? As a success fee. It was an unexpected proposition, but Arthur didn't show any signs of being upset or offended. Instead, he seemed open to the idea. Something else instead of money. As long as it's not too demanding, what is it? I'll do my best to fulfill your request. Oliver pointed towards Albert, or more precisely, the stake Albert had plunged into the world tree. Can I also receive the information that Mr. Albert has obtained? I'm interested in knowing everything, without any omissions. Oliver inquired, casting his gaze upon the remnants of the various machines on the walls. Naturally, he was curious about what had transpired in this place. Fast forward button, 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 fast forward button. 6 o'clock in the morning. A time when most people would still be in bed, except for factory workers and grocery store owners. A man rose from his bed and proceeded to take a shower. SSSSHHHH. Despite staying in an exorbitantly expensive hotel, a luxury even in Landa, his day began early. His name was Shamus. He was an enjoyment druid, formerly the top solver in Landa, and the brilliant entrepreneur who founded the remarkable investment company known as ABC. In contrast to his usual flamboyant and indulgent appearance, his mornings started earlier than anyone else's. After his shower, he dried his toned, muscular body with a towel, applied cosmetic lotions for his face and body, and generously slicked back his green hair with hair wax. Finally, dressed in a flashy green suit, he left his suite. "Good morning." Shamus's subordinate, Dugan, greeted him. Having been waiting for him since earlier, Shamus engaged in work discussions with Dugan as they walked along the corridor. "Right, who raided our operation?" "The Special Security Bureau of the city. If I recall correctly, some of them were also on my payroll, weren't they?" Has justice turned a blind eye? The Security Bureau had been established amidst numerous controversies, and their exact role remained unclear. However, Shamus had paid a substantial amount to them in anticipation of potential emergencies. Yet, they had been infiltrated. Yes, but there were those who refused the money. So, one of the non-compliant individuals targeted us. Who? A man named Arthur. He's one of the team leaders in the Security Bureau. He acted on his own before his superiors could intervene. The excuses for incompetence are always the same. What's their objective? On the surface, it's to dismantle the illegal operations run through McCluskey Security Company, but I suspect there's more to it. ABC. Instantly, Shamus grasped the situation. His ability to make such judgments showcased why he had not only thrived as a solver in the city but also managed to retire safely and lead a successful business career. Yes, we haven't found concrete evidence yet, but we've confirmed that Arthur had several meetings with government officials from the Ministry of Interior who are not favorable towards us. Moreover, this guy named Arthur enough, stop. He's targeting ABC. Shamus swiftly reached the conclusion. With ABC's stock value currently soaring and no previous operational issues, there could only be one answer. And what about our people? It appears they have all been defeated. By our people, Shamus referred to Jeffrey, Kittle, and the others his druids, his true subordinates. Feeling a mix of anger and frustration, Shamus clenched his teeth before speaking again. It's surprising. I didn't expect anyone from the Security Bureau, who primarily focus on average combat prowess and organizational ability, to stand against our people. Did they come at us with significant force? No, only a small number of teams under the team leader's command were involved. That's peculiar then. They hired a solver. Dave. Shamus halted in his tracks. That guy never seems to fade away, does he? Is he my enemy? And the Moirai school is also involved. Traces of world tree hacking have been discovered. Is that all right? It's fine. Although I do own stocks there, I've never been involved in management, so it's not my concern. I've only provided loans and invested in other companies, so there's no direct connection. Ignore it. No, I'm referring to traces of Eve. Dugan glanced around before speaking again. We deleted all the crucial information, but as you know, complete erasure from the world tree is impossible, right? We intentionally left behind the information that led to the discovery of Eve, just in case. Would that pose a problem? It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's already happened, and they can't do much with just that. We druids couldn't gain any significant advantage, so what can the imposters achieve? Shamus spoke nonchalantly, but his judgment was sharp. For someone juggling extensive business ventures and projects, this particular case didn't warrant much concern. He didn't even believe that the likes of Moirai could unearth anything substantial. Let's focus on the pressing matter at hand. Whether they target ABC or McCluskey Security Company, all the illicit businesses operating there will be exposed. Inform our contacts in the paper company to stay silent and comply with the agreement. If they fail to understand, show them their share of money and their family addresses. Yes, understood. That won't be a problem. Good. How is Eve faring? What's the return rate? It remains the same. Eve itself is growing, but controlling it is becoming more challenging, so we can't fully utilize its potential. Dugan appeared troubled, but Shamus didn't pay much attention. Isn't there a saying that those who seek power must bear its weight? The same principle applied. It's okay. It doesn't matter. I wasn't planning to use it immediately anyway. Just keep a close watch on it. It's something we stumbled upon miraculously, and we can't afford to lose it. We understand, don't worry. Good. Now, get in touch with Craig. Craig. Why all of a sudden? We need more bait. Bait? Haven't we already achieved our target? By target, Dugan referred to the investment funds flowing into ABC. Surprisingly, the current influx of investment funds had surpassed 1 trillion and was on track to reach 2 trillion. An astronomical figure that was hard to comprehend. But Shamus didn't seem satisfied with it. Indeed, we've reached our target. Every day, numerous individuals bring their money directly to me. Honestly, destroying a few companies is no longer a big deal. Even if we skim off a portion of the investment funds flowing into ABC and distribute the profits, we can sustain ABC for a while. Then why call Craig? I'm unsure if we should distribute the profits. We need to maximize our gains while we can. I don't plan to settle for just 2 trillion in the world's wealthiest city. We should aim for at least 3 or 4 times that amount. And to do that, we need an equivalent amount of bait. So call Craig. Let's plunder the world's richest city together. Chapter 280. The battle at McCluskey Security Company ended uneventfully. There were no less than 5 druids in the vicinity of the forest, but they failed to play a significant role. However, it was somewhat unfair to blame them. No matter how strong one is, depending on the opponent or the situation, one could die like a rookie. For instance, Connor, who was outside the building, had to face 7 security agents alone, and the 4 druids inside the building had to confront a warlock in an enclosed space full of corpses. It was the worst condition to face a warlock who specialized in manipulation. Well, Oliver wasn't exactly a warlock specialized in manipulation. Anyway, the raid on the McCluskey Security Company, despite unexpected situations, ended without major issues. Maybe that's why I feel a bit bored even after the job is over, Oliver said at the Forest restaurant. Oliver was sitting at a table with a white tablecloth, and Forrest was sitting opposite him. Is that so? Yes. Oliver put down the newspaper he had been reading and looked at Forrest. Forrest was also reading a newspaper, and there were several other newspapers stacked on the table. This seems somewhat noisy to me. Forrest placed the newspaper he had been reading on the table. The page had the headline, "Giant Crime Connection." Revealed by the Security Bureau. Written in bold. Other newspapers on the table also had this article on their front pages. It's not easy to fill the front page with one story in Landa. It needs to draw universal interest, regardless of social status. Does cleaning up the crime organization draws that much attention? Asked Oliver. He had no intention of belittling Landa, but this developed, affluent city was infested with numerous crime organizations, just like cockroaches. There were so many that most citizens thought they could coexist. Hence, eliminating a criminal organization was not such a big deal in Landa. After all, another organization would fill the vacuum. Well, you're not wrong. Cleaning up a crime organization isn't such a big deal. However, at this scale, it can be a topic of conversation. Above all, the most important thing is that the Security Bureau did it. Forrest pointed to the picture of Arthur printed in the newspaper. He was giving an interview to reporters in front of the devastated McCluskey Security Company. His unique strong impression along with his intellectual look was highlighted. The picture seems well taken, but I don't quite understand. Why is it important that the Security Bureau did it? Well, I guess you could be confused. It's a bit tricky to explain. It's a matter of pride. Pride. Yes, the pride of being a Landa citizen. Everyone living in the city has that pride. They think they belong to the kingdom, yet they don't, they're special. The toilet cleaner and the factory owner would think the same. I understand. So, people in Landa want something special that distinguishes them from the kingdom's people. For example, an organization between the army and the police created to deal with superhumans. Is that the Security Bureau? right, if an organization that doesn't exist in the kingdom is protecting the city, they feel somewhat happy about it. It's not rational, but it's not something you can't understand either. Oliver pondered for a moment and then slowly nodded. He couldn't empathize, but he had a vague understanding. That's why so many newspapers run this story on their first page. It sells well. Yes, I see. However, when I say I'm bored, I don't mean that. I'm asking why they didn't cover ABC or Mr. Shamus in the articles. Just as Oliver had said, all the newspapers thoroughly covered McCluskey Security Company and the criminal companies they were effectively running, but they didn't write a single line about Shamus, the actual owner. Not even the newspaper, which was hostile to Shamus. In other words, either Arthur, or rather, Carver did not disclose it. I don't know about that because I haven't heard anything. However, I can guess. Guess. Yes, it's an old man's speculation, but would you like to hear it? Of course. I would appreciate it if you could. At Oliver's polite request, Forrest smiled faintly, sipped his coffee, and opened his mouth. I guess it's because it's of no use to reveal it now. No use. Yes, besides McCluskey Security Company, there's hardly anything related to Shamus. But I know what you want to say. You want to say that everyone borrowed money from Shamus and received investment, right? Oliver nodded his head. Leaf Loan lent money to camouflage companies to help them start up, and ABC made significant investments, enabling their businesses to grow. Both profited considerably from the process. To Oliver, it seemed like there was a substantial connection. You're right, but even so, it's not possible. If you tie the debtors and investors to the guys who lent money and invested, half the people in the city should be in jail, even though they're the ones who should really be in jail. Ah. Of course, if you dig deeper, you might be able to find evidence, but it's meaningless in the current situation. Everyone is fascinated by Shamus. Forrest showed him an article from one of the newspapers on the table. It was an article about ABC, stating that they returned the high returns to their investors without any discrepancy. The photos included in the article showed city workers grinning broadly. What do you think would happen if an investigation into Shamus proceeded under these circumstances? Would people be upset? Oliver used his imagination to the fullest. Forrest was pleased. Yes, exactly. People will foam at the mouth about what they're doing to an angel who brings them money. They'll complain about how much money they're making. Then, public officials and city council members who receive kickbacks from Shamus will use this to obstruct the investigation. In other words, it's a pretty useless weapon for now. Until the situation ripens further. So they are saving it for later. That's right. They've collapsed one of their main sources of income, so it's time to watch until they show a weakness. Oliver thought of Shamus. He didn't know him well, but personally, he didn't think Shamus would show his weakness so easily. Although his actions seemed light and noisy, his emotional state and results indicated that he was quite profound. The case where he attracted everyone's attention using Oliver at the investment party was an example. When he mentioned this fact, Forrest didn't deny it either. I agree with that. Shamus probably won't show his weakness easily. Reckless, flashy, loud. Although he gives off an impression unrelated to wisdom, what matters is not the appearance but the result. He is a strategic figure who has succeeded in any role, from solver to businessman. He won't easily reveal his weaknesses. But conversely, it also means that things won't go his way. Pardon. Shamus is a special person, but everyone in Landa is special. Landa is not a small city where one person can swing from beginning to end. Forrest confidently said, and Oliver chewed on his words with a strange feeling. Everyone is special in Landa. He didn't know why, but it seemed like a wonderful phrase. That's a good slogan. Everyone is special in Landa. Yes. It was once an slogan pushed in Landa. To secure cheap labor, you know. Oh. I should pay more attention to S in the future. The conclusion may be strange, but if you are satisfied. What I want to say is, there is no need to be particularly anxious. An elite from the Ministry of Internal Affairs has taken charge, and others in Landa are also keeping an eye on ABC and Shamus. If there really isn't a problem, fine. But otherwise, an opportunity will come. City officials, especially those belonging to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, are great in a different sense from the superhumans on the streets. You know a lot. You get to know a lot even if you don't like it when you've been in this field for a long time. Well, I've worked with them in my youth. Was it when you worked with Mr. Kent? Forrest was taken aback by the sudden question. He would usually recover quickly with his unique cunning attitude and experience even when he was taken aback, but this time he couldn't easily do so. Huh. I thought you'd wait for the answer. Oh, I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. I asked reflexively. It's not uncomfortable, but it was surprising when asked suddenly. Do you have something going on? It's strange to reveal your personal opinion on the mission. He was right. Forrest immediately recognized the subtle change in Oliver. The reason why Oliver, who is currently on a mission, reveals his personal opinion and asks the question he had been waiting for is none other than the 5 letters in his pocket. When he was assigned a task, he could naturally forget about it for a while as he was focused on that side, but he couldn't when he was waiting like now, so he was a little troubled. In order to forget this trouble, Oliver occasionally voiced his personal opinion on the mission he usually didn't, or asked different questions to forget this curiosity for a while. But he couldn't talk about this fact. Oliver dodged it decently. It's nothing. Sensing that something was going on, Forrest thought for a moment, drank his coffee, and opened his mouth. It's probably time to tell you about me and Kent. Oh, really? You reacted too quickly for someone who apologized. Ah, I'm sorry. I was just happy. I'm happy about that. After this mission is over, I'll tell you. After the mission is over. Isn't that the order? Besides, I need time to sort out my thoughts. Is there a problem? No, there's none. Oliver tried hard to shake his head. He honestly wanted to hear it right away, but Forrest's words also made sense. You don't seem okay. Forrest saw right through Oliver. Oliver, handling the letters in his pocket, responded in the negative. He was able to distract his curiosity about the letter for a moment with another curiosity. He also harbored doubts. He wondered what on earth Merlin was doing and where he was. I need him to come quickly so I can read this letter. Fast forward button, fast forward button, fast forward button, fast forward button, fast forward button. I can't understand why I'm doing this here. Merlin, wearing a thick coat and carrying a heavy backpack, reached out and lamented. Contrary to his drawn-out tone, Merlin's hand gathered a great mana that most wizards couldn't amass in a lifetime. The mana turned into a bright blue lightning bolt according to the will, and it branched out into 5, then gathered back to 1 point and struck a giant skeleton about 5 meters away. Pow! As soon as the 5 thin lightning strikes hit the target, it created a powerful spark, and the shock wave caused by it shattered the surrounding trees as well as the giant skeleton. "This never ceases to amaze me," Merlin muttered, watching the shattered skeleton dissolve like butter into the ground and the trees that were broken by the shock wave return to their original state with smoke. This sleeping forest was indeed a strange place. First of all, it's bloody strange that its location ain't fixed and constantly changin'. What do ya reckon? Swoosh, thud. Merlin asked, catching an arrow flying towards him with magic. Looking in the direction from which the crude arrow came, he saw a dwarf with button eyes, a large nose, a pointed hat, and just a frock coat. A dreamy appearance with no sense of reality. It was even a little cute. However, one shouldn't be captivated by that appearance. Just like the giant skeleton that Merlin had knocked down earlier, it was also merely a creature made with black magic. The creature, sensing an unusual atmosphere, retreated towards a nearby stump. Surprisingly, there was a door in the stump, and the creature used its small body to go inside the stump. It was trying to escape from Merlin. Merlin reached out towards the stump. Ground eruption. Along with the chant, the ground underneath the stump deep inside started to shake, and a large amount of soil erupted upwards like a volcano. There were countless dwarf creatures in the soil. Compression. Merlin used magic to hold the floating soil, tree roots, rocks, stones, and creatures in the air, then clenched his hand tightly. The compressed creatures gathered into one point and turned into a lump of meat due to the pressure of magic. "There's no end to this," Merlin said, looking at the ground that had perfectly returned to its original state, and all kinds of creatures that were filling the dense forest. "It's so hard to ask a question." In the end, Merlin decided to slightly break the etiquette and take an easier path. As an old man, it wouldn't be too bad to break a little etiquette, would it? Merlin gathered mana in his hand and summoned a book from thin air. Merlin ripped the book and threw it up into the sky. To set the sleeping forest on fire all at once. Will it go back to its original state? At the moment he was about to activate the magic, the creatures in the forest disappeared, and an old man with fairy-like wings on his back appeared. "The princess has awakened."